Okay, this is going to be a remix review of Ring of Honor's Best in the World 2011. Speaking of the real best in the world, I just saw that Bryan Danielson returned. It was actually to a Ring of Honor show in Mexico. I think it was called, was it Global Wars? It looks like Danielson came back. It looked like it was just a one-time only thing. I would assume he's probably going to be at All In if he was on that show. But yeah, Supercard of Honor is coming up. It looks like it's going to be on Honor Club. Bandito versus Takeshita. That looks like the big money match right there. The rest of the card doesn't really look that great. But we'll see what happens. I mean, that we're still a long ways away from that. But we're going to go all the way back to the glory days of, or the end of the glory days of Ring of Honor. To me, like, you know, when we're talking about end of an era shows, or, you know, what are some of the shows where you kind of feel like the company went through a transition? I think this is it. I think in a lot of ways with Best in the World 2011, I would look back at the show a lot more positively. Like if Ring of Honor like went out of business, like if this was the last show, I would say like, oh, okay, you know, that was just a beautiful way to end it. But it wasn't the kind of show where I felt like they could feed off of the momentum, whatever you want to call it, coming out of it. So we're going all the way back to June 26, 2011. This is from the Hammerstein Ballroom. We do 2,500 in attendance. I'm trying to think, is this the return to the Hammerstein? Let me see. They stopped running the Hammerstein. The last Hammerstein show was actually Manhattan Mayhem 3. You know, when Aries became a two-time ROH champion. Flair was at that show. So that was like the last Hammerstein show for a while. That was in June of 2009. You know, I think it was during the NBA Finals. So they took like a 2-year hiatus from the Hammerstein. So the return to the Hammerstein, they tried to make it feel like a big deal. Best in the world. When they titled this Best in the World, I thought they were really going to, you know, bring in talent from all around the world. Like I was really hoping for like a Kenta return, that type of thing. But, you know, we ended up with Davey and Eddie. I'm assuming that Punk actually did see the show. You know, I think Punk probably saw it. I don't think, you know, my impression was that Punk really wasn't a big fan of ROH around this time. I know he was at the Honor Takes Center stage shows during WrestleMania weekend. I know he was actually there in like a hoodie. Somehow, some way he actually got away with being there and enjoyed the show. But someone did notice him. But I don't think it like created like a huge like deal. But yeah, I'm assuming Punk was aware of the show. I don't know if he saw it or whatever, but I just know at this time he wasn't crazy about Ring of Honor. You know, anytime someone asked him about it, he would always say that, you know, the people that made Ring of Honor great are just not there right now. You know, that would be me, Joe, Gabe, and Homicide, you know, stuff like that. So, but I'm assuming that Punk, you know, looked at the title. He probably saw the show. And he probably, you know, maybe the show gave him enough confidence to say, you know, those guys aren't the best in the world. I'm the best in the world. So who knows? But I always thought it was kind of funny how Punk, you know, titled himself the best in the world the day after this show. You know, there's a whole bunch of guys that I'm naming that, you know, I'm sure nobody even remembers there. But, you know, bottom line is it was a big night. Unfortunately for me, like, you know, this is June. So in June, you know, I'm really kind of like, you know, working out every single morning because, you know, the sun comes out early, especially on the weekends. Like, I just love to get those extra workouts in there. I probably played pickup in the morning. I just remember getting to the show and just being like, I was just like, man, fuck, I'm just like toast. You know, usually on a Sunday, even nowadays, like on a Sunday, I'm like really, you know, once you get home after lunchtime, I'm like dead. So my energy level was low as hell. And thank God I'm doing the remix because I just watched the video back. I watched my review back. I watched Nightmare Baller's review. And then I just watched True Slayer's review. I gotta say, I thought it was pretty crappy. The quality and just the energy level was pretty bad. But we're off to a rough start with all this YouTube stuff. So let's get right down to it. So yeah, I think at the time, you know, they had a sellout crowd of 2,500. They sold it out. But if anyone remembers, you know, I really felt like this was kind of the beginning of the end for ROH in terms of like, you know, the popularity. You could just feel the booking of some of the things on the show. were a sign of bad things to come. But when you get to Final Battle 2012, I was actually in the second row for that show. So that show, like the whole upper balcony was just empty. There was just nobody there. They couldn't even fill, I think, the first balcony when you get to Final Battle 2012. But for this show, obviously they sold it out. I think they sold it out too for Final Battle 2011. But for as questionable as some of the booking was here at Final Battle 2011, it was pretty much on another level in terms of like the panic alert. So at the time, this actually generated 2,100 buys, making it the most purchased ROH internet pay-per-view up to that point. So yeah, I thought the show did really well. It did, so Sinclair had just taken over the company. I believe this is really like the first major like Sinclair show under the Sinclair umbrella. They weren't on TV quite yet. I think they got on TV, like around September. So we're still a ways away from TV. But, maybe you want to give them credit for promoting it. It just felt like, a lot of people were, interested in the main event. I think it was a refreshing main event. And, there just seemed to be a lot more buzz for this show. It definitely felt like the most hyped Ring of Honor show since maybe Death Before Dishonor 8, if that makes any sense. But, definitely not as good. I think there's a lot of stuff on the show that just fell flat. And then at the time, it did feel like once they made the purchase to Sinclair, it felt a little bit more Cornette heavy in terms of his involvement, his direction with the booking. It definitely had that feeling to it. I don't know if it was like a dual Booker type of thing with Delirious and Cornette. But the bottom line was I thought Ring of Honor that whole year, when they transitioned away from Pierce in the fall of 2010, I thought it was pretty damn good. I didn't really have a problem with the product until like after this show. Like I really didn't. Let's get right down to it, though. The first match tonight, we had Generation Me. We had Jeremy Buck and Max Buck, the Young Bucks, taking on Adam Colt and Kyle O'Reilly. Man, they only go about 7 minutes here. So this is actually a DVD extra right here. There was like this preppy tag. What's the name of that tag team? It's not even hitting me right now. But there was a tag team that came in. The Bravado brothers. The video wire here, they must have actually like spoiled this and said that they were going to come in and, fuck up this match because, they were upset that they weren't on the pay-per-view. So it definitely made sense. But the real reason behind the booking here, I'm going to assume, or the way they booked it this way, Generation Me is in TNA. I'm assuming TNA just didn't want to have a clean finish. At the same time, they don't want Colt and O'Reilly, to lose to Generation Me while they're about to go on TV. So they just gave you like this little bullshit DVD bonus match. The match was good while it lasted. I mean, it was exciting as hell. You know what to expect from these guys. Everybody brought it here. I mean, it really was. This was really on its way to being like one of the best things I ever saw. Like in New York City for a Ring of Honor show, it definitely had all the recipes for that. I think because it went on first, there was a lot of excitement in the air. Plus, there was a lot of people there that probably just watched TNA and WWE and not ROH. So, for a match like this, you're a little bit more excited about it. All right, next up, you had Tomasso Ciampa coming out there with Prince Nana and Ernie Osiris to take on Colt Cabana. I mean, at the time, when I'm looking at the undercard right here, it's really not that bad. Like I'm seeing guys like Tomasso that were cold at the time, but eventually he become a great wrestler. Cabana is he's a household name. You could argue because of Punk, but still he's a name. And then you got Jay Lethal making his return. You got the prodigy Mike Bennett, who at the time was really in a rough place, but eventually I think he won people over. Then you got Homicide, you got Rhino, you got Michael Elgin, you had Steve Corino. You definitely had like some good talent here, but for some reason, but at the time, the undercard just felt a little bit bland. It really did. But but when you look back on it now, it's not an awful mix of talent, throughout the show. But Tomasso just in the beginning of his ROH run, it really was kind of similar to Mike Bennett. where, he just wasn't really connecting. You didn't really see what the big deal was. You heard rumors that, this isn't really what he can do. I just thought him and Cabana just had a nothing match right here. I mean, the ending was cool. I think the right guy went over. Cabana here looked a little bit out of shape. He looked lethargic. He just looked past his prime at the time. I don't think, that this version of Cabana. Look, I love Cabana. I definitely think there always should be a place for him. I think his biggest problem is just conditioning. But it came out that Cornette was not a huge Cabana fan, everything like that. But hey, man, I did want to mention this about Cabana. I think he's funny. Cornette actually said, funny doesn't make money, but you could see the influence. I've always compared him to Adam Sandler. But you know who he really reminded me of here? And it's because there's a lot of Pee Wee stuff on HBO right now with the documentary. And I think they have the movie available right now, Pee Wee's Great Adventure, Big Adventure. He really reminds me a little bit of Pee Wee Herman, a little bit. It's like a mixture of both. So I think Cabana has a great personality. But, this match right here, this just wasn't during his heyday. He just feels like he's really, really far removed. And not to mention Homicide is on the show, but he feels like he's far removed, from the heyday when he was feuding with Homicide. All right, next up we have Jay Lethal taking on the Prodigy Mike Bennett. We got Bob Evans out there. I thought this was okay. I mean, this was cool because of the crowd. Lethal got an incredible crowd reaction here. They're chanting "fuck TNA" to him. I'm assuming that he must have had a falling out with Hogan because there was a ton of "fuck Hulk Hogan" chants, and then Lethal embraced it by waving his doing the ear to the crowd thing like Hogan does, and then Macho Man had just died, so there's a ton of Randy Savage tributes here, and then they were chanting "You Still Got It," which is funny, and I even said this in the regular review that the "You Still Got It" chants were. Because there's so many times when guys coming from TNA suck that, they felt like they had to do the "You Still Got a Chant," even though Lethal's only 25 or 26. But I think the match is okay. I wasn't blown away by Bennett's performance here. They're chanting "You Can't Wrestle" to him. Any type of offense here is just, he's just trying to get heat with the rest hold or whatever. There's really nothing I could say that, that blew me away from Bennett. But it was just a nice little homecoming for Lethal. You could tell he was a little bit rejuvenated. Pounding the ROH letters like he was here to stay, and it ended up being great for Lethal. He became Ring of Honor champion over the next couple of years. I thought he got better on the mic, better in the ring. Lethal is an ROH legend. Some people even think he's the best ROH champion. The only reason I wouldn't say that was I just feel like, the best era of ROH, was just earlier. So it's tough for me to say that Lethal was the absolute best ROH champion when he didn't have the best talent pool to work with. That's what I'll say about that. Next up, we have Homicide taking on Rhino. No holds barred match. Rhino was a good fit for Cornette because Cornette could always say Rhino. But no, seriously, right here with Homicide and Rhino, you know what? I really wasn't crazy about Rhino coming in. I think, when anytime you see Rhino main eventing a ROH show, I think a lot of people kind of roll their eyes about that, but in this spot right here, it wasn't the worst thing in the world. I think Homicide, I can't remember how much longer he stayed with the company, but at the time, there was rumors that, this was going to be his last match. It would have been a great combination. I think it really would have. I think they clicked pretty well. I don't think it was awful. I just remember Homicide, taking a lot of criticism, that whole school year, that 2010, 2011. You want to classify that as one whole school year. He definitely took a lot of criticism that year for just not being what he used to be. But yeah, Rhino still had some juice left. I thought it was cool. This is a no holds barred match. They really didn't do anything crazy until the aftermath. Homicide's able to get a sunset flip and actually get the victory here, but Rhino gores him through the table. So that was nice for all the ECW fans. There was still a lot of ECW shirts in the crowd, so they satisfied the bloodthirsty fans there with that. But the first couple of matches right here, they're just okay. They're just good stuff. Nothing to write home about. It definitely felt like they wanted to save the bulk of the time, for the second half. Next up, we have Michael Elgin taking on Steve Corino. All right, so this is where you get the big Kevin Steen stuff. So I honestly, at the time and even now, I'm not a huge fan of this Kevin Steen like push. I think it was poorly handled. I just think it felt too much like Vince and Austin. It felt like they were trying to recreate that. But I'll give Kevin Steen credit. I think it was probably what they should have done. Steen just took a big break from the company, and it was a cool way to kind of reintroduce him to ROH, to have him kind of feud with Cornette, and for him to be Mr. anti ROH. But it had such a cool factor to it that I just don't know if it worked. And once once they did turn Kevin Steen heel, they started having him, throw shots at Davey, and then all of a sudden that's going to hurt Davey. So I just thought straight from the get-go, you were going to run into problems with this, for a lot of different reasons. I think the two biggest reasons you ran into problems were, the Cornette stuff seems very fabricated, and it seems very much, I think the business is so exposed at this time that it's tough to really buy into it. Now, I'll say this about the Cornette Steen stuff. I think it's aged kind of good because you learn to know that, Kevin and Jim Cornette, never really liked each other, and Cornette wasn't really a big believer in Kevin and Sammy. So looking back on it, there's actually some real life tension there that you could really buy into. But I think my biggest gripe with it is, Kevin had such a cool factor that I thought it really just hurt Davey Richards' title reign. I really thought it did. They closed shows with, Kevin, talking shit to Davey, and the fans were turning on Davey, and it was just it's not the reaction that I think, that Davey was hoping for, but it felt like that's the reaction that they wanted, like when they booked it like that. So the bottom line is, Kevin comes out and then Cornette comes out. All the officials are trying to, get Kevin out of the building because he's not supposed to be there. And, he's Mr. Rebel. But it was, look, in terms of Kevin Steen being over, this was by far the most over guy of the night, because of this. And that leads into a match between Michael Elgin and Corino. Corino and Jimmy Jacobs at first, they were trying to push, for Kevin to come back to Ring of Honor, like sign him back. Then all of a sudden, Elgin and Truth Martini come out, so you get this match between Elgin and Corino, it was actually pretty good. I think Elgin looked really good here. Corino's definitely past his prime, out of shape, and moving a little bit lethargic here. But I got to say, Elgin, it was good stuff. I think at this point though, Elgin is still, trying to, prove himself and get in people's good graces. But, when you look back on it now, you just wish Elgin had a better opponent, because Corino is just a little bit, the match was just definitely overshadowed because of everything Kevin did here. And then after the match is over, Kevin came out and he sets up the big heel turn, where he comes back out and then he's like, fuck Ring of Honor. And then surprisingly, he turns on Steve Corino, he turns on Jimmy Jacobs. Then, Cornette comes back out like, Kevin shouldn't be there. So it was pretty cool. Okay, next up for the ROH TV title, we got Christopher Daniels taking on El Generico. So this is when Daniels is in the House of Truth. Okay. All right, so Daniels is about to go back to TNA. I think TNA is kind of moving away from Hogan and Bischoff a little bit at this time, and they're bringing Daniels back, which is probably the right call. I think at this time Daniels was probably a better fit to be a tag team wrestler. So Daniels had come in, I think, in April of 2010. So this is his last match, but yeah, I think the return for Daniels was pretty good. I think it was Daniels kind of exiting out of his prime. I think he's still good, but, not quite where he was in the heyday. But he puts over Generico on the way out. I think this is one of my biggest gripes with the show is the company is purchased by Sinclair, and, anytime a company like this is going to come in, you would think that they wouldn't lose so much talent all at once. And I think that's my biggest gripe about it, You would feel like if this new investor is coming in, this new corporation is coming in that's taking over the company, there will be a little bit more of a sense of urgency, to sign guys. Instead, it was the opposite. It was like Daniels is leaving, Hero is leaving, Claudio's leaving, this guy's leaving, that guy's leaving. It would just kind of put a sour taste, I think, in everybody's mouth here. But hey, the bottom line is they put the television title on Generico heading into TV. It was good, because when Kevin came out, the fans were doing the Ole Ole chant, like they still wanted to see Jericho attack Steen. So I thought that was cool. Daniels really kind of carried this whole match in terms of controlling it. He dictated the tempo. It was very, very slow, methodical, but it was good, though. It was good stuff. They worked up to a good finish. The finish was hot with Generico taking the belt. The coolest thing about this match is I think they took out a photographer, and eventually Daniels, thought he should have been awarded the match after the count out. And so he actually puts the belt on, and he actually does the best moonsault ever with the belt. Generico counters, he gets his feet up, and then he puts Daniels away with the brainbuster off the top turnbuckle. So you got a hot finish. I thought you got a hot finish. I think the match is really, really good. Not quite great, but hey, it was one of the best. This is trying to think. This might be Generico's only singles title in Ring of Honor, because he never won the ROH World title. He did win the PWG title, though. All right, next up for the ROH Tag Team Championships, this is a 4-way elimination match. They go about 40 minutes here. We get the tag team champions, which is Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin, the world's greatest tag team, taking on the Briscoes, the All Night Express, the Kings of Wrestling. All right, so it's a 4-way elimination match. So that's what sucks about it. Some teams got to be eliminated first. All right, so with Best in the World 2011, I think this is the match that took the most criticism on the night. I think it's the most polarizing match. There's a lot of people that actually love this match. I'm kind of in the middle now. I think you can make the case for it and against it. So I'm going to make the case for it. I think if you like old school, tag team wrestling, like especially like from the 80s, from the NWA days, I thought it was pretty damn good. Like in terms of it being slow, but at the same time just being old school and traditional. At the same time, I think you had a lot of teams here. While it was slow at times, you did have some incredible like stuff here. You definitely did. I think, looking back on it, Claudio, the Kings of Wrestling were awesome. For Ring of Honor to lose to Kings of Wrestling, that sucked. And a lot of people, I would agree, though. I think you got to put yourself back in that time frame. When you see the last two teams involved, it was just too predictable. It was too, you could call it from a mile away, because at the time there was no way the Hero and Claudio were winning, especially with probably rumors out there that they're leaving. So that was definitely the wrong call. But in terms of the action, Claudio had some incredible moments here. I mean, he was in his prime. Both Hero and Claudio were at the apex of their powers. I would agree with Trueslayer. He said that UFO spot was the best he could ever remember. It came off great. I think he did it to Charlie Haas. It came off awesome, fucking incredible. Shelton here looked good. Shelton was still great. I mean, he had some great moments of athleticism. The double arm drag came off great. So, it's just good, old school solid action. I thought Heroes, played a great heel here. Some of his, loaded elbow spots came off great. I mean, they wrestled pretty hard. And the All Night Express, I got to say, I thought Red Titus looked better than ever here. And, even the All Night Express, I thought they fit in quite well. It didn't feel to me like, they belong in the wrestling school or anything like that. That wasn't the case at all. My biggest gripe with the match is just the fans. And some of the fans, I could definitely understand it. When the Briscoes let me talk about the Briscoes first. So I'm going to make the argument against it. My biggest gripe against this match is, the Briscoes being eliminated first. There are times, like if you're booking a wrestling company, you have to, keep an ear to the street. And I know they did like a big Briscoes beatdown at the end of this thing, but still, I think it was the wrong call. when you see the Briscoes heel turn and Jay's promo, Jay Briscoe just cut, what I still consider one of the best promos in Ring of Honor history, the day one promo. It's fucking awesome, that promo. It caught on. It caught on to the point where the Briscoes had, new life. So I feel like when you consider that, you gotta readjust the booking here. The Briscoes should have been, in this thing to the end, because once you eliminated them first, you took the crowd out of the match. So that's number one. But goddamn, man, Jay Briscoe in that promo, he's like, and we out here eating Campbell's Chunky in this motherfucker since day one. The Briscoes put that shit up against our '07 title reign. Murphy Rep, pretty boy, pussy. Just the alliteration that he was using when they were talking about some of the teams. Pretty boy Pitbull, pretty boy pussy. I could go on and on about that promo. That promo is awesome. It's the kind of promo where, what was cool about it was all off the top of the head. It was just, he was just kind of having fun with it. It didn't really take a genius to do it, but it was just Jay being himself. Really kind of rubbing it in that, the Briscoes have been there since day one. There's no other tag team that can compare. And he really put over the show huge. He's like, this is the biggest show in Ring of Honor history. We have to win this fucking match. I thought it was great, man. So RIP to Jay Briscoe. I don't think he gets enough credit for how good that promo was. Like there was just something authentic about it. I know, like, it's not the most articulate promo in the world. It's when you compare this promo to Punk's pipe bomb, like Punk's, delivery and his articulations like a lot better. So it's tough to compare it to that. But both promos, I would consider both promos great. But yeah, man, I just thought when the Briscoes got eliminated, it took a lot of the fans out of the match. I remember this one guy next to me was like, he's like, boo, we want the Briscoes. Bring back Gabe Sapolsky. So, you had a lot of that stuff going on. And this was a very, in the original review, I said mainstream audience. There was definitely, I guess there was a lot of boring chants here. That really didn't translate on the DVD for me. But yeah, it got a little bit monotonous. And there was a stretch in this match with Haas and Benjamin and the Kings of Wrestling where they just lost the crowd. And it felt slow. It felt slow. It really, really felt like Cornette got involved here with the pacing of it. And, I mean, there were some great moments. There really was. But there was also some moments where it just felt like he was advising a lot of these guys to just slow it down. We're going to be on television soon. It definitely felt like that. I hate to say it. It just did. I think the other biggest knock against this match is Charlie Haas. Shelton looked good. I have no complaints about Shelton, but there's a lot of stuff that Haas was doing here that just made me say, this guy's just not a good fit for this company. Even in the beginning of the match, he leaves the match and starts picking up a kid in the crowd. I'm just like, what the fuck is he doing? And even during the match, I just thought he looked slow. He had some good moments in terms of suplexing, but for the most part, he just didn't look like the same guy anymore. He looked a little slow a step. He just didn't look as good as Shelton Benjamin. I've always kind of like, he was always one of my bigger problems with this era of ROH. I just didn't think he was aging that well. I don't know what it was. I was never really a big fan of Haas at this time. So I think he definitely brought the match down. And yeah, I think the crowd was a little bit weird here. The "This is racist" chants for Shelton Benjamin and Kenny King. They both got tagged into the ring like right away when the match first started. And then all of a sudden there was like a huge, "This is racist. This is racist." And Kenny King, he made the thing by his ear, like, you guys are fucking crazy. And Shelton kind of just laughed it off. It really wasn't a big deal. It's not that big of a deal. But you almost say to yourself, like, would that even happen today in wrestling? I think the answer would be no. I mean, how many times do you see two black guys lock it up in NXT nowadays? It's become the norm. It's become very normal. But, maybe in 2011, we're still not that far removed from, the racists of the world, fucking up our mentalities. I don't know what it was, but let me just say this about that comment about the "this is racist" thing. Realistically, it's not that big of a deal. It shouldn't take away from the match for me. But what I've kind of learned, throughout the years, especially for some of the guys on here that like wrestling, that are black, I've really kind of get the impression that a lot of guys watch one of the reasons we watch wrestling is it kind of takes us away from racism or thinking about the real world, and we could just appreciate the characters for who they are. You could appreciate Jay Briscoe for who he is. You could appreciate Shelton Benjamin for who he is, Kenny King for who he is. You don't say, oh, Kenny King is black, Claudio is white. You say, no, that's Claudio. No, that's Chris Hero. You don't think of him as a white man. Like you think of, oh, Larry Bird is a white man. So I think that's one of the reasons we watch is it kind of takes us away from, thinking about racism. And I think, eventually we want to get to the point where you don't even have to point out racism. But it is what it is. I don't think it's I don't think it deserves that much of a reaction, to be honest with you. But hey, man, I think the match was cool. Like in the original review, I said, you'll appreciate this match a lot more if you could, I would say this: if you really want to enjoy this match, just lock into this one match, one morning when you have your coffee, and let all the coffee be digested or drank during this match, and I think you'll like it a lot more. It's one of those matches where you kind of have to psych yourself up for it. Like if someone like smacked you upside the head and said, I'm going to force you to watch this match now, and you're not really ready for it, that's when it's going to be like, it's a little bit monotonous, that type of thing. But it's a mixed bag. It really is a mixed bag. I think the most negative thing about this match is the crowd, number one, the booking of the Briscoes, number two, and the style too. Like there's a large portion of this match where it just, for the first time, maybe ever, it just felt like Ring of Honor is just a little bit watered down. Like it just definitely had that feeling to it. Okay, and on to the main event. For the Ring of Honor World title, we have Eddie Edwards defending the ROH title against Davey Richards. Both guys are baby faces. Both guys are good guys. They never, there was really, I don't think they ever did like an official Eddie and Davey split. So let's go back in time. So when Roderick Strong was Ring of Honor World Champion, he lost it to Eddie Edwards at, I think it was Mayhem 4, which was on March 21st. So, which was kind of a surprise. I mean, I had pitched the idea of Eddie winning, but I didn't really think they were going to go through with it. Then all of a sudden you had this Eddie Edwards title reign, which was fantastic. Like it lasted for a couple months. He won in the WrestleMania weekend. I think he beat Christopher Daniels WrestleMania weekend at Honor Takes Center Stage. And then just had some good matches. I think he had one against Roderick Strong again at Supercard of Honor. And then even before that, I think he wrestled Hero was in Canada, Revolution Canada, which was awesome. That was another good match. So I really enjoyed Eddie Edwards' title reign. I think it was a little bit too short, but here we go. He's going to put over Davey Richards to go about a half hour. Ended up being great stuff. I still think it holds up well. Like in terms of the actual match, I think it's very stiff. I think it's very emotional. I thought they wrestled hard. I think some of the transitions here are excellent. I love that transition with Eddie's Fisherman Suplex. I thought that came off great. And, some of the headbutts were crazy here. Trying to think what really holds up well here. I mean, it's very emotional, too. There's a lot of parts here where Eddie is screaming at Davey to wrestle harder and just don't think about it. Just do it. The leg screw spot. The ending where he says, "You'll always be my brother," it didn't really get captured on DVD, but I remember a lot of people were able to hear it live. That's one of the disappointing things about this show, especially when you consider the sale to Sinclair. I mean, you would think the production values would get better. The footage and the audio and everything, it just feels like regular ROH. It doesn't feel like it's a step up from the heyday. It doesn't feel like it's a step down. So that's kind of one of the disappointing things about it. I think when you see 2011, you would just expect, HD quality, where some of the other companies like WWE and TNA were like well into the HD years, but this just feels like, regular standard definition, not great lighting, not great audio, not great quality. But if you can look past that, I mean, it's an amazing match. I mean, I still think it really does hold up. I think at the time it was unpredictable. They wrestled hard. Davey's kick at the end was just, yeah, I think they really went for like more of a feel good ending, like a definitive, ending rather than just some type of quick schoolboy or even like a finisher overkill thing. I don't think they wanted to do that. They just wanted to have more of like a symbolic, definitive ending with Davey's kick to the chest. So I think everything holds up well. I think the aftermath holds up well. I think this would have been ideal, like perfect, if like Ring of Honor was going out of business. Like I think you would look back at this show like a little bit more positively, but it doesn't feel like it's the kind of show that you could really. Didn't really give you a lot of material to play with. Going into, television tapings or going into the next phase of the company. It just really didn't give you anything to get excited about. It really felt like very much like a Lifetime Achievement Award, for Davey Richards. So yeah, I think the match is really good. It didn't suffer from some of the things that the Final Battle match suffered from. Like it really didn't. When you get to the Final Battle match, some of the issues that this crowd had where they're not really engaged and, they're a little bit spoiled and not that into the product. It was definitely more magnified at Final Battle. But with this particular match right here, I don't really have much to complain about. I think everything was great. It came off great for the most part. It actually got a good reaction. I mean, there was Match of the Year chants. There's actually ROH chants. Just abrupt during the match because of how good it was. Actually, it was after that Eddie Edwards Fisherman suplex where, the fans are just chanting ROH. They're chanting, "Thank you, Davey. Thank you, Eddie." The aftermath was pretty cool looking back on it as Davey actually thanks his grandparents and, even admits that he doesn't have much family. And it was really, really well done. I really enjoyed it, actually. I just don't think it's the kind of show. I just don't think it's the kind of aftermath. I think the timing was just weird because if they're really going to TV soon, I just would have had a little bit more creative, aftermath. Look. If you didn't want to do like something creative and out of the box here, I think that's fine. But eventually, you had to do it, and they never really did it. It just seemed like things got even more stale by the time you get to Final Battle. Like they did some weird stuff with the training and going behind the back with, training with MMA guys, but they never really pulled the trigger in terms of, getting you excited about, the direction. I think looking back on it, this is what I would have done here. Look, I like the fact that Davey got to enjoy the moment and everything. I really, really do. But I think I would have had Davey turn heel here. I think that would have been the way to go. I would say, like, do exactly what Gabe Sapolsky did on that Dragon Gate show where Davey turned on Danielson. He didn't necessarily turn on Danielson, but he kind of neglected the code of honor. And, Danielson came out and just wanted to put him over and say, "You're the best wrestler in the world." And Davey just said, "Fuck you. I don't need validation from you," that type of thing. But this situation here would have had like a surprise heel turn from Davey, with Davey just being selfish and, Davey just taking the title, from Eddie in a very, very selfish way. I think that's what would have made this a little bit interesting, to be honest with you. Because you had to do it's here. Look, you had to do something. Because when you get to Final Battle, the match was cold as shit, and a lot of people stopped watching after Final Battle, and that's the bottom line. I actually like the fact that you can have two guys, be that competitive in the ring, trying to kill each other and kick each other to shreds and headbutt each other, and then after it's over, they could still be best friends, and the competition doesn't take away, it doesn't really hurt their friendship outside the ring. I actually like that, and there's definitely an art to that in real life too, especially like with me. Like if I'm competing against one of my best friends and we're competing on the court, and then afterwards it doesn't really affect our relationship, that's good. I mean, that's good, because a lot of times it does. Sometimes that competition can bring the worst out of you, and it kind of triggers down into away from the court as well, where there's certain guys you could be really competitive with, and sometimes they'll hold a grudge, even when after the game is over. So there's definitely an art to, I think, what Eddie and Davey did here. I just think like looking back on it, I think my biggest argument against it is I just think it really hurt Eddie Edwards. I mean, this guy's supposed to be young. He's supposed to try to be proving himself. He just had an incredible title reign, which only lasted for a couple of months. He was, a lot of people thought he was becoming like the best wrestler, like in North America. Like a lot of people thought he was that good. So he's just supposed to let Davey, lose to Davey Richards and just be like, oh, okay, it's okay, Davey. He's like, you're always telling everybody how great they are, but you're the one, we need to celebrate. You're the one that works harder than everybody. You're the one that has been the best wrestler in the world for over 2 years, which was cool. But at the same time, it's like Eddie's just supposed to be okay with losing the belt and not winning it back. It just, Eddie's mentality, especially with this being the biggest Ring of Honor show ever, there's a lot of flaws in it because of that. I'll just say that. I mean, look, like any competitor, it's almost unrealistic for them to just kind of bow down to the challenger winning the championship and just be like, kind of celebrating with the guy that just beat you. It's a little bit weird, but I understand it. They're all part of the same family. Eddie, Davey and Kyle and Tony Gozina, they spent a lot of time together, so it's cool. There's a lot to like about it, and there's a lot to dislike about it as well. In terms of just not executing the heel turn. I'll give them a pass for not doing it on this night, but leading up to Final Battle though, there definitely should have been a little bit more creativity. The face versus face match for this thing, it actually worked really well. You didn't see any bogus, heel mannerisms that really took away from the match. It was just really ultra hard and ultra competitive, and I think that's why the match has aged so well. But yeah, man, I do think coming out of this thing though, it's one of the biggest botches I think Ring of Honor's ever had. This whole Davey and Eddie rematch thing leading up to Final Battle was really, really disappointing. And the proof is in the pudding, because that crowd just did not give a fuck about that match. There's just a lot wrong with it. But hey, man, that's Best in the World 2011. When I watch some of the reviews back now, it feels very mixed. It feels mixed. I think there's a lot to like here, but at the same time, it still feels like, it feels like a different company. And I still think, one of the biggest mistakes Ring of Honor ever made, was letting go of Gabe Sapolsky. The Pierce thing wasn't that bad. I think Pierce was definitely a happy medium of both. I think Pierce did a really, really good job. I think he kind of, eliminated some of the flaws that Gabe had. But at the same time, it still didn't exactly feel like it's the heyday. But still, it wasn't, Pierce being the main booker, it wasn't as bad as, the next couple of, months for Ring of Honor. But I think the combination of Cornette and Delirious, especially this whole Cornette run until he was fired, I think it was probably one of the weakest times that the company had. But yeah, I was never really cool with Gabe Sapolsky being fired. I'll just end the video by saying this. I mean, me and my brother, we went to one of the best shows, probably the best show we ever went to, was Death Before Dishonor 6. Like we both even said, man, that's got to be the best show we ever went to, and everybody was happy with the show. It was just great. So, I just don't see how you could go from that to being fired in under 3 months. It just something just doesn't add up there. And it never felt cool with me. I understand the economy was rough at the time, and Carrie Silkin's the one that made the decision. I don't know, something about Carrie Silkin. Look, I think you want to give him credit. He's always going to get a lot of credit for being the ambassador to Ring of Honor, and he did help save the company. Even Gabe has been very candid that Carrie Silkin deserves a lot of credit, but I'll just never understand that decision. And even if you weren't a big Gabe Sapolsky fan, you still don't want to do the move because, Gabe had proved himself to the point where he was going to be given a certain amount of power. And Dragon Gate gave him that power, and he was able to sign talent that Ring of Honor would have had. And you just say to yourself, man, Ring of Honor could have been so much of a better place if Gabe had just stayed in charge of it. But I think the biggest problem with Gabe Sapolsky in Carrie Silkin's eyes was that he just didn't want to grow the company. I think he just wanted to stay. I just think he wanted to maintain that hardcore rabid fan base, and he didn't want to expand. I think Carrie Silkin, on the other hand, he really wanted to go to new horizons, whether it's HDNet or whether it's live pay-per-views. I think he definitely wanted to do that, and that's the biggest reason I think for the change. I would call this a great show, like if this was the end of the company and everybody was doing what Daniels did. It was going back to TNA or going to the WWE. I think that's a good way of looking at it, but instead, this ended up being the last show before they got on the Sinclair Broadcast Network, which really wasn't a good fit. I don't think Sinclair had a lot of money, and this was syndication television. I don't even think I got this on television, so I think that's one of my biggest gripes with it. Is just, you didn't have the best owners actually coming in that were willing to spend a lot of money, and I think the fact that so many people were leaving around this time is definitely proof of that. But hey, I think the worst period of time was this whole Cornette run. It felt like Cornette got a lot of power, over the next 12 to 15 months or whatever. But I think after that, I think the product was good. I think, Ring of Honor on Sinclair Television, 2013 to 2018, I think it was a good product, not great. I think the biggest problem at the end was just, money. You could blame it a little bit on the pandemic, but at the same time, I think the pandemic kind of forced them, to go back to basics. So it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but I just think, not having a lot of money over the years, just kind of, took the life out of the product at the end, and the end was the end. But hey, man, I'll just end it right there. That's Best in the World 2011.